The largest single flood may have filled the Mediterranean 5 million years ago, according to Daniel Garcia Castellanos and Paul Carling from The Conversation. A little over 5 million years ago, water from the Atlantic Ocean found a way through the present-day Strait of Gibraltar. According to this theory, oceanic water rushed faster than a speeding car down a kilometer-high slope towards the empty Mediterranean Sea, excavating a skyscraper-deep trough on its way. The Mediterranean Sea was at the time a largely dry and salty basin, but so much water poured in that it filled up in just a couple of years, maybe even just a few months. At its peak, the flood discharging about 1,000 times the water of the modern-day Amazon River. At least that's the thesis that one of us put forward in a 2009 study of an underwater canyon excavated along the Strait of Gibraltar, which he presumed to have been carved out by this massive flood. If correct, and some scientists do dispute the theory, the so-called Zanclean megaflood would be the largest single flood recorded on Earth. But extraordinary claims like this require extraordinary solid evidence. Our latest research investigates sedimentary rock from the Zanclean era that seems to record how the water surged through a gap between modern-day Sicily and mainland Africa to refuel the eastern half of the Mediterranean Sea. How scientists tracked down the megaflood? Our findings is the latest twist in the story that began the late 19th century. That's when geologists studied salt-rich rock outcrops around the Mediterranean, became increasingly aware that something unusual had happened between roughly 5 and 6 million years ago. Well before the glaciations of recent ice ages, the sea had dried up. They named the age Messinian, and the drying up eventually became known as the Messinian salinity crisis. In the 1970s, scientists for the first time drilled deep below the Mediterranean into sedimentary rock from the Messinian age. They made 3 surprising discoveries. First, they found a massive layer of salt, kilometers thick, below much of the seafloor. This confirmed that a vast environmental change had happened about 6 million years ago, when just tectonic plates shifted and the sea became largely isolated from the Atlantic Ocean. And second, right above this salt layer, they found sediment with fossils from shallow, low salt lakes. This suggested that the Mediterranean Sea dropped to more than a kilometer below today's level, and as most of the water evaporated, salt was left behind. A series of lakes would have remained in the lowest parts of the basin, refreshed and kept alive, relatively salt-free by streams. This interpretation was also supported by seismic surveys of the seabed, which revealed rivers once cut through a dry landscape. And third, the rocky layers above the salt abruptly shifted back to more typical deep-sea sediment. We now know that less than 11% of Mediterranean marine species survived the crisis, showing just how big and lasting the impact was on life in the sea. The term Zanclean flood was coined in the 1970s to refer to the end crisis, without scientists really knowing what it consisted of, or in the timescale taken to refuel the dry Mediterranean basin. A cataclysmic refill? The next breakthrough came in 2009, when geophysical data for the planned African-European tunnel through Gibraltar suggested that a huge underwater trench between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea must have been created by a sudden and cataclysmic flood. Our latest research backs this hypothesis. As part of the team led by Maltese seabed scientist Aaron Micallef, we explored the region where the flood water filling the western basin of the Mediterranean would have run into a ridge of higher land, connecting modern-day Africa and Italy, known as the Sicily Sill. So, in fact, Italy was totally connected with northern Africa, splitting the Mediterranean to east and west. Now, was there any evidence, we wondered, of a second megaflood? as the Eastern Mediterranean filled up. And piecing together the puzzle, Giovanni Barreca, one of our co-authors on the recent paper, grew up in southern Sicily. He long ago realized that the low hills near the coast are an extension of the Sicily sill over which the megaflood must have progressed from west to east. The area, he thought, might contain clues. Our team visited this part of Sicily and noticed that the hills were indeed unusual. Their aligned and streamlined shapes, separated by deeply eroded depressions, are very similar to streamlined hills in Washington state in the US. Those Washington hills were carved out by a megaflood at the end of the last ice age, when the vast Lake Missoula dammed up behind a glacier and emptied catastrophically. If those hills and depressions in Sicily were also shaped by a huge flood, then rock debris eroded from the base of the depressions should be found dumped on top of the hills more than 5 million years later. And sure enough, we did find jumbled and contorted rocks, debris up to boulder size along the crest of the hills, and they were the same types of rocks found within the depressions as well as further inland. To double check our work, we developed a computer simulation or model of how flood waters might have crossed one part of the Sicily sill. It shows that the flood would flow indeed mimic the direction of the streamlined hills. And in fact, the model showed that the hills would have been carved out by water 40 meters or more deep, that's 120 feet, traveling at 71 miles an hour, 115 kilometers an hour. In the one area we modeled, 13 million cubic meters of water per second would have flooded into the East Mediterranean basin. For reference, the Amazon today is about 200,000 cubic meters per second. But this one would have been 13 million cubic meters per second. Remarkably, this is still only a fraction of the water that first flowed through Gibraltar and then into the Eastern Mediterranean basin near Sicily. And this was from conversation here under Creative Commons on Science Alert. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.